like you can kind of think of, I guess, the periodization for the general population or people who are trying to build muscle in a few different ways. Like one of the most common ways that people would periodize would be something like we do 4 weeks at 12 reps, then we do 4 weeks at 8 reps, and then we do 4 weeks at 5 or 6 reps or whatever, something along those lines. And planning that in advance can work quite well. But one of the things that I like to do with at least a lot of my clients is that especially my longer term clients, I'll review, let's say, their last month of training, and then the month before that, if they were with me before that, and I'll say, right, what have we done so far? Okay, so on your bench press, we did sets of 6 last month, but we did sets of 3 the month before. So we were actually doing a lot of strength work the month before, not so much this month. Joints seem to be in a good position. You don't have any pain. You have been progressing well, no signs of excessive fatigue. And one of your goals is to try to work on really building up your maximum or bench press strength towards a 1 rep max. So we might go back towards the lower rep ranges again then. There's no reason why you can't do that. And then, for example, at the end of that month of training, it might be the case that the person is getting quite bored of the lower rep stuff. They're finding themselves becoming disinterested in training, or their elbow started to hurt or something along those lines. So I might say, right, next month we're focusing a little bit more on the higher rep ranges. I want you to do sets of 8 to 12 on bench. And we're just going to focus on, staying a few reps shy of failure and just accumulating a bit more overall volume. And then again, we're iterating as we go. So we're saying, all right, how did that go now? Do you feel better? Did you progress in that rep range? How's fatigue now? How are the joints, etc.? And then we keep going from there. So you can absolutely be a bit more top down about it in terms of saying, this is what the next 6 months will look like. And that's fine. And it's something I'd encourage someone to do if they're kind of planning their own training and they're not good at like sticking to a plan. At least have some idea of what the next 6 months will look like. So then you're not left in the gym ever without a plan. But if you're working with a coach kind of closely, it's actually useful to like get the feedback week to week, understand what responses you're getting from training, and not just stick to a long-term plan just for the sake of it. Because that's like one of the things that would be not really useful from a coaching perspective. If I just gave my client 6 months of training up front and they checked in each week and I didn't change the programming based on the feedback they were giving me, then that's not really coaching. It's just me kind of saying that I can expect a certain outcome 6 months in advance, which isn't really possible. And that will be one of
just on that as well, though. That doesn't mean that you should be changing your program every single week.
No.
Like if you see it and it's literally like, okay, you're getting stronger here, you're getting stronger here. Everything seems to be good. You're in a good position. Like why
milk it?
Yeah, literally, why would you train that or change that? Because I've had clients before do that where it's like, you'd be like 3 weeks into a 6 week block, for example. You're like, okay, this is roughly what we're going to do, 6 weeks here. And then they'll be like, oh, like, should we maybe change something here or maybe change something here? Especially, if you have like a coach who's a client, they're kind of thinking, oh, well, I would maybe do this, or, they're involved in the process, right? And then you're kind of like, no, like you are literally getting stronger everywhere. We're moving towards the goal that we want to achieve. Like, why would we change that? We should just be milking this for everything that it's worth, And I just wanted to interject there because it can seem oftentimes that, especially if you're changing your plan periodically, periodization, it can seem like, oh, making changes is a good thing. But oftentimes making no changes is an even better thing.
Absolutely. If you're getting bigger and stronger successfully, you're doing better than 95% of gym goers. Keep going, okay? Because most people aren't. Most people are stalled, or they're not sticking to a plan, or they don't know what they're doing. So if you're on a plan and things are going smoothly, don't change it just for the sake of it, because that's what people do all the time. They're having success with something, so they say, oh, how can I make this even better? I better change a few things. It's like, no. Just milk this for now and you'll be fine. So yeah, that's that. So I think something I was going to touch on just there is just, I guess, understanding that you can't predict outcomes super far in advance. Okay. And that's the kind of the point I was making about coaching. That would be, an example of kind of a top-down approach where you're saying, right, here's exactly what you need to do and here's the outcomes you're going to get. biology is just too complex for that. Okay. Training adaptations are too complex for that. You can't look at someone and say the next 6 months, this is what it's going to look like. Here are your progressions week to week, and stick with that. This is one of the things that people run into, even outside of periodization specifically. More indirect, where this will emerge, will be with just progressive overload generally. People will try to add, let's say, weight to the bar every single week. And then as soon as they can't add weight to the bar, they change their program, because effectively they had assumed that they would be able to keep adding 5 kilos each week. And that was an assumption on their part as to what the rate of adaptation would be. But assuming that in advance just doesn't really make any sense. And that's one of the things that I think, like you said earlier, a lot of people who might say they don't periodize their training, they do so just unintentionally. When it gets to the point where they can't progress the weight anymore, they'll change their exercises or they'll change their rep range, because they need to constantly be seeing that weight increasing on the bar. So it's kind of a misunderstanding of the training process in some sense. So I guess like my message there overall would be, take the feedback as it comes back to you, whether that be from your coach, or if you're a coach, from your client, or if you're just managing your own training yourself, from how you're feeling. So are you recovering from your training? Are you picking up injuries? Are you feeling super fatigued and disinterested in training? Are you adding weight to the bar? If all those indicators are positive, keep on going, keep doing what you're doing. And if they're not, if you're getting negative feedback from those indicators, then you have to actually ask yourself, what have I done? So you don't just say, right, I'm going to change to the next step for, let's say, going from the 8 to 12 rep range to the 4 to 6 rep range, because that is what you'd planned in advance, because that would actually be quite a bad call if you had already picked up lots of fatigue and your joints were sore, etc. It might actually be a better case then to say, right, I'm actually going to pivot to different exercises, lower overall stress, further from failure, potentially higher reps. So that's why that iterative approach to training is really, really important to get comfortable with over time.
100%. And just to make this just a little bit more like practical for the everyday person, because you have to remember, like, it can be very hard to put all this stuff in, you like try and think of all the different variables, being like, oh, what should I do with my training? Like go back to the last few episodes and go, okay, well, we've put together a workout program. We've, started at the rep. We've picked maybe a few different exercises that work well for us. We've gone, okay, well, I want to do we'll start at the low end of the volume, 10 sets, right? And you've designed up your program, right? The next step then is going like, how am I going to progress this over time? And we covered that in a podcast, right? But then you go, okay, well, over time has a component of, time, right? It's like over that longer period of time. It's not just the next 4 weeks, the next 8 weeks, the next 12 weeks. It's the next 20 years, the next 50 years, whatever, right? So we want to design something that goes, okay, well, we want to manage, as we said, fatigue, those kind of stressors, and then ultimately the adaptation that we're trying to go for. So you should take a step back and go, okay, well, I want to manipulate a few different variables. We have reps, right? You can manipulate the amount of reps that you do, right? That's a very easy one to do. Literally take the workout you just designed, and you said maybe you're doing 3 sets of 12, right? So it's the exact same amount of volume, 3 sets of 12, 3, right? That's the amount of sets. We're just going to use that. We're going to use that as a proxy for volume, right? We're not going to do like a multiplication or anything, right? So sets, that's what we're using for volume, right? So you could easily manipulate that over time by going, okay, those 3 sets of 12, the next block, so let's just say 4 weeks, for example, because it's roughly a month. The next block, we're going to go for 3 sets of 8, right? So your overall volume in terms of number of sets has stayed pretty much the same, right? But we're now going a little bit heavier, because obviously you can go a little bit heavier doing 8 reps versus 12 reps, right? And that might, again, allow you then in future to lift a little bit heavier for your 12 reps if you go back to that, right? Because we're, slowly edging the nervous system towards being able to handle those greater loads. And obviously in the process, well, hopefully anyway, building some muscle to also facilitate that, right? So that's a very easy 8 weeks. All we've changed there was the amount of reps we're doing. That's periodization, right? Very simple, right? But we can also do it another way and go, okay, well, over time, I want to build up to a level. I want to focus on my quads, right? I'm going to alter my training, volume overall, so that more emphasis is put on my quads, right? But I don't know how much my quads need. I don't know how much they can handle. I used to have a bit of a knee injury, a little bit of an adductor injury. So I don't know what they can handle before they start giving out, right? So what you might do is, I'm going to put everything else on the back burner. I'm going to put, like all the other stuff that I'm working on the back burner. And let's say, again, we have that kind of rough range of 10 to 20 sets as a good target to be in per week of, amount of volume we want to be doing. Now, again, sometimes you might want to go lower, sometimes you might want to go higher, but let's just pick that as an average range, right? You might go, everything else, I'm going to do 10 sets. I'm just keeping everything else. But quads, I'm going to start this block and I'm going to do 15 sets. Right, I'm just going to see where that's at, right? See how I feel with that. And I'm going to do that for 4 weeks. And let's say, again, we're doing the exact same, model we were just using, 3 sets of 12 for the first 12 weeks, or for the first 4 weeks, right? In the next 4 weeks, we're still doing those 15 sets. We're going to go, okay, again, 3 sets of 8. Now, we could, if we wanted to, we could also go, well, I know how I've responded in the past to that, change of 12 reps down to 8 reps, right? I know what that feels like. I know how my body responds. I know all those kind of variables, right? I want to manipulate the volume now in terms of the number of sets. You could, in the next block, you did 15 sets this block. You might go, okay, the next block, I'm actually just going to go to 16 sets. We're increasing the weight, but we're dropping the reps. So, let's see how I get on with that. It's only 1 extra set, right? And then you could do the same the next month. You could be like, okay, I'm going to bring that up to 17. Next month, 18, 19, 20, and so on, right? Like that is, technically periodization. You have periodized your training over time so that you are building the amount of volume you do as measured in number of sets for your quads over time, right? Until you get to this like maximum amount of volume that you can do, that you can recover from, right? And that is a form of periodization. You could also do it the opposite way and go, okay, well, I have a block of, really heavy, or I shouldn't say heavy, really volume heavy quad training or leg training. This block, I want to give a little bit of a rest for that. I need to, wash away some of that fatigue that I've accumulated. The next block of training, I'm actually going to do a higher volume block for my upper body, and I'm actually going to do a lower volume block for my lower body, right? Because you've already accumulated all this fatigue, right? And you could do that very easily. Like say, for example, you don't have a lot of time, but you know that you respond better to 20 sets per week for a body part, right? Like you could basically go, okay, well, this month it's lower body. That's what's getting all the volume, and the upper body, I'm doing the bare minimum that I can do, right? But I want everything to grow over time, right? So this month it's a high volume lower body block. The next month it's a low volume lower body block, but all that volume I was doing towards the lower body is now on the upper body, right? So you're, managing your fatigue that way. You're dropping some of the fatigue from the lower body as you move into the higher body block, and then vice versa when you keep switching between those two, right? Because you're in a position where you're like, I know I respond better to 20 sets per week, but I don't have enough, energy or enough time to do 20 sets per week for all of my body parts, right? Or you don't have the ability to recover from that. Like most people probably wouldn't, but you don't have the ability to recover from that. So you're like, okay, well, I have to periodize my training to focus on different things over time. And this can also be done if you have weaker body parts, where you're like, okay, well, my arms don't seem to respond. Apparently that's every single guy where they're like, oh yeah, I just do 20 sets per week for arms, but you might go, okay, well, I'm actually going to periodize my training to focus on a little bit more arms for the next 3 blocks. I'm going to pull back the volume for lower body. I'm going to pull back the volume for XYZ. And I'm going to really just focus on the upper or the arms, like there's multiple ways to periodize your training. I just wanted to make that a bit more practical in your head, because you should understand why we're doing this. And then you should start thinking about like, how do I actually put that into place?